stupid bitch. Yeah, you're a stupid bitch, you stupid bitch. Welcome to another episode of Stupid Bitches Say What, the Aussie podcast about everything and nothing, but always with wine, and your hosts, Sean Hipkins and Skye Collett.
This week's episode is True Crime. Sean covers the unsolved tragedy of the Luna Park ghost train fire. Ooh, I remember that one. That claimed 7 lives at the amusement park in 1979. While I cover Chopper Read, who he was, what he did, and the conflicting emotion one can have towards a murderer. I love that. What are you drinking, Sean?
Well, Dals, after last week's showdown with the double birds, I'm back on the reds, and I have a lovely bottle of Cab Merlot called the
Companions.
Yes, can you see that? Have you
I've
had
drunk it. It's catalogued in our wines, you stupid bitch.
Oh, is it?
I've drunk it before. Yeah. Actually, did you say it was a Cab Merlot or a Cab Sav?
Cab Merlot.
Oh, see, I've had the Cab Sav, I'm pretty sure. We'll have to go back through the catalogue to verify that, but yes.
It's so good we have that catalogue now. So this is a Byron and Harold. It's 750 mils, but I can't find the year. Oh,
50 mils.
The 2019.
Aren't they all, unless you're drinking a Magnum?
Yeah, I know. That's the only number I could see. But it's a 2019 from Western Australia, and it's nice. So is this a naked wine, is it?
Yeah, well, yes, it has to be. Unless you've got it from some random other place, but I certainly got it from Naked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's nice. Hang on. It actually goes down well. I haven't had any first sip shivers. If you like a nice Cab Merlot, I'd recommend it. My rating is
fabulous. Fabulous. Taste it.
What are you drinking? What are you drinking, Skye?
Well, look, full disclosure, as we generally do, it's a double podcast night tonight because we're going away next weekend to see the fabulous. The fabulous Australia Decides. What would you say? A heat of Eurovision?
Well, it is. It's the contest where we, the voting public of Australia, get to decide who we send as our representative to Italy for Eurovision this year.
You said that much more eloquently than I did.
Well, Eurovision's my jam, baby, for a few years now.
Anyway, because we're double dosing tonight, I'm saving the vino for the next episode, and I'm just on just a crisp beer, an extra dry, a Tooheys extra dry, if you will. The clean, crisp taste. It's 345 mils.
Oh.
But I am on my second one, so it's 1.2 standard drinks, of which I've had 2.4 standard drinks. Cheers.
Bravo. Oh, cheers, bitch. And I have to say, good choice of beer. It is our go-to. Tooheys Extra Dry. It needs to be available in more pubs.
Do you know I have to fight Tyler a little bit on this because he would prefer, he's really into the Great Northerns. And I have to say, I'm not a massive fan. Like, I'll drink Great Northerns, of course, but everyone loves it.
Yeah,
and I'm like, it's okay. Or he's a carton. What's the blue one?
There's a carton dry.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a lover.
I don't mind carton dry. I get what you're saying about Great Northern. I don't think it's great. I will drink it if that's the best of a bad bunch on offer.
And it's 0.9%. Look at my glasses. It's
that's 0.9. A Great Northern. It's super crisp, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the other one that's the full strength, isn't it? Because they had it on tap at the Bolo on the Sunny Coast, and I used to always say, "Give me the full strength one," because I could never remember which one it was, and I hate drinking a light beer. I think it's such a pointless exercise.
Unless you're driving, you're just filling yourself up and not getting pissed.
Yeah, exactly, with lots of carbs and sugar. No, thank you. I want to get pissed.
And that is my job. So I can't believe, and I thought about this after, obviously, our episode, that we didn't actually talk about the Ukraine in What's the Haps and the whole Russia debacle.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, look, I have just started getting back into the news again because I'm no longer living with my sister. And I put the news on every morning. So I'm a bit out of the whole. I know that there's a war pending and that Russia's invading Ukraine, but I don't really know how it started or why.
Well,
do you?
So I believe
fight over land as per usual. It's usually a fight over land and territory or money, isn't it?
Usually. You know how back in the day the Soviet Union existed, i.e. the Berlin Wall, that whole conspiracy.
Yes. Thanks to your educational episode, yes.
Should say what episode 3 back in time, please. So back when the Ukraine was part of the Soviet, as were a few of the other Eastern European countries. So Ukraine is now wanting to join NATO. And I think Russia aren't happy about the fact that they do, because it's more westernized. And if the Ukraine do it, how many of the other areas will start to follow suit and want to join NATO and become a bit more westernized and not communism rule. And so he's been sending hundreds of thousands, well, I think 150,000 troops to the borders of Ukraine, saying it's just a regular military drill, which is a load of shit. And it was all they actually.
It's psycho.
It is. Well, remember he did that when I think we had that thing here. I can never remember the name of it. We all got the public holiday. It was in Brisbane, the World Summit of something.
Yes, he said the submarines, didn't he?
All the submarines.
It was the G20 summit. But I thought that was a drill in the end, and they said no, it's part of what are the drills that they do, because G20 is the summit for international security, isn't it? Where they all get together and talk about. And there's a bit on terrorism again. Like I might be showing my ignorance here, but I thought the G20 was about security, weapons, yada yada. Yeah. And that's why they said that the submarines were part of the drill.
Well,
God, I wish we had a fact checker to tell me how wrong I am when I spurt some of this shit out.
Look, I have no idea what the G20 summit is, and that is all on my ignorance. Vinny would be here shaking his head very coldly at me if he could hear me saying this. But
like you on our perception of stars.
Yeah, exactly. But everything seems to be a military drill with him. So they thought, though, that the day that they were going to have it all happen was, I think, yesterday, which was the 17th of February, which is the Ukrainians' national day of celebrating when they became a republic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was heartbreaking. Vinny and I were watching the news, and they had the drills that they were running through with the school kids, just in case there was an air attack. Like a little classroom of fucking 7 and 8 year old kids, and the teachers running through a drill with them of what they're doing if an accident happened, is what they said. Not, they didn't want to terrorize kids with an air strike. And, and they were interviewing the teachers, and they're like, we're just telling the kids that we have to, if they've got their area that they go to down in one of the bunkers, they would tell the kids they have to stay up against the walls and not to make any noise and not to panic, and just to listen and behave calmly and listen to what the teachers are saying, yada, yada, yada. And I was just thinking, what the fuck? Imagine being 8 years old at school and having to go through those drills. But anyway, it was a big week. With the Ukrainians and the Russians. He was meant to start withdrawing troops, and I think some of them did go back, but they weren't sure if the troops were just moving to another checkpoint, basically.
Yeah. And also, just quickly before we move on, and did we talk about this when we recapped What's the Haps, but Prince Andrew settled?
No,
did we already cover that?
No,
if we did
I've got that
cut this out, because it was new that happened maybe Tuesday, did it? Yes. Or maybe it broke the news Tuesday, so we re-recorded the bit we missed on Monday night. And he settled, which I just, oh, goodness me, I just,
well, money talks, and apparently it was like $10 million, I think. Some of the money goes to a charity.
Isn't the whole point that after all these years of her coming out, after all these years, was to prove that he had done what he'd done, and then settling means that it's all behind closed doors. And yes, You could speculate that he would only settle if he was wrong, but it was never really tried in court. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like, you know,
Look,
after all these years, if it happened, but yeah, I get that. But, you know, if it was if he was prepared to settle for that amount and it was likely true or there was enough evidence to, you know, lean towards it, she would have gotten money in the end anyway.
There would have been a lot of pressure.
He settled and there's no consequences.
Yeah, well, I mean,
true.
Ultimately,
and we don't know what it's like to be a woman who's, you know, had that kind of situation.
She's probably also, and exactly, I don't want to speak on her behalf, but she's probably also sick of the media circus that surrounded it as well.
Especially when you're gunning for a royal, right?
It's a royal, yeah, exactly.
We know what happened to Princess Diana.
Well, exactly. The conspiracies run rife with that.
Not so much just the conspiracies, but just how much they just stalked her and taunted her.
Oh, the media.
You know, they were relentless.
Yeah.
Something like this in this day and age with the, you know, advances that they have in modern technology. It would be awful to be hounded.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, it's it just, I mean, to me, it spells out his guilt, obviously. I didn't ever not believe he didn't do it. He just never thought he would ever be in a position like he was in today where it would come back and he'd have to be accountable for it. Also,
how times are changing.
How times they are changing. All right, so I'm going to start this week, am I? With
yes, I'm so excited because do you remember, just digressing very slightly, but the Point Fiction books, do you remember the Funhouse one? And there was a couple of variations of that Funhouse where there was always a ghost train situation, or there was some type of ride that killed people, and it ended up someone messed with the ride, and it was always a teenager that was the killer, wasn't it? Occasionally there was a teacher thrown in there, but it was usually one of the a bit like a Scream premise. But yeah, there were so many of those point horrors which I adored when I was younger.
I'd like to read one again and see if it still holds well in the reading value.
I'm going to say no, because I remember when I was in year 11 at Alexandra Hills State High School many moons ago, I was like a library fiend because I read so much. And I went in there one day and the librarian pulled me aside and she said, look, you read so much. I watch you devour book after book. Please, can I say this to you without upsetting you? But you read garbage. Can I please give you a book? Can I please recommend some books for you that you could equally enjoy? And she got me onto Bryce Courtenay and Minette Walters, and a bunch of other stuff. But she was, and once I started reading more adult narratives, I was like, these books are garbage.
Yeah, it's hard to translate though, to transition, I guess, because when you're younger, it's like watching your favorite shows. You can watch them over and over and over again. You love them, but then you don't even want to.
You love what you love, even if it is garbage.
Then all of a sudden, something flips.
It's me and Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, you see something else and you're just like, oh, actually, this is good.
Yeah.
They knew what they were talking about. All right, so anyway. It was 9th of June, 1979, your typical winter evening in Sydney. Luna Park was bustling with families, which was nothing unusual for the popular theme park. But around 10:15 p.m. that night, black smoke began billowing out of the ghost train ride. Attendants sound the alarm and start desperately getting people off the train as the cart's coming out of the tunnel. Several passengers also escaped by jumping out of their cart and kicking down the walls, the partition walls, and staff rush in to guide others as they come out of the dark labyrinth, trying to avoid the flames and the thick smoke. Empty carts start coming out of the ride, all engulfed in flames, and it's believed that then everyone's off. There's no one else inside. Within an hour, the entire attraction is engulfed in flames. It's not until later, when the firefighters are inspecting the rubble, that they find 7 bodies inside. The other riders who had tried to escape the flames by leaving their cart and obviously getting lost inside the ghost train maze and the smoke, and then eventually perished. A father and his 2 young sons and a group of 4 high school friends children's ages range between 4 and 13-year-olds. They're the victims of the fire. 12-year-old Jason Holman, who was best friends with the 4 high schoolers, was saved from the fire. It was the first time the group had been allowed to go out without any parental supervision. And as closing time approached, the boys had time for one last ride before they head home to their parents. They choose to go on the ghost train. The boys have to split into groups of 2. So the first 2 pairs boarding their carriage, and then Jason sat alone in the last carriage behind them. He watches as the train takes off and his friends disappear into the entrance of the ride. I'm getting goosebumps. And they're gone. He watches his friends disappear into the entrance of the ride, and I can see your cat. It looks like it's going to do a projectile shit on you.
Look, what's a Friday night double podcast without my cat being a complete jerk?
Mine's got one down next to me. Sorry, inappropriate timing. He watches his friends disappear into the entrance of the ride, and as his carriage nudged on the doors, an attendant pulls him out of his seat because of the commotion that's happening. He didn't see any smoke or flames, and he didn't hear any screams at the time, so he had no idea what the fuck was going on. On the outside, the ride didn't seem any different, but inside the ride, a small fire had started deep within the structure. The fire grew into a raging inferno, and the ride started quickly filling with black smoke. Shortly after, the smoke began to creep out from the ride, and that's when the screaming starts. And as I said, people had started kicking down partition walls of the ride to escape and stumbling outside. Jason is stood in front of the ride waiting for his friends to appear, but they never do. Just empty carriages keep coming out in flames. Jenny Godson lost her husband and 2 small children in the fire.
Oh my God.
The couple had finally decided to take a trip from their central western home in New South Wales to see Sydney and do the zoo and Luna Park. So this is back in 79. So that would have been a massive trip. It would have been a huge thing, going to see the big smoke. A train driver's strike that was happening at the time meant that the family had to take a series of buses to Sydney, which delayed their arrival time significantly. They get to still go to the zoo that afternoon. Then they head back to the city and have dinner, and then head to Luna Park for a night time full of rides. It's time for the family to leave, and they decide to use their last 4 ride tickets on the ghost train. While in line, Jenny gets, and I quote, a bizarre urge to get some ice cream, something that she never usually ate. She asked if anyone else wanted one. They didn't, so she told her family to go ahead in the line and wait for her, and she'd join back up with them when she'd got her ice cream.
Oh my God.
By the time she comes back, the father and the 2 children are already in the ride, and had perished in the flames. A few weeks later, the mother develops pictures from the holiday and finds a picture of her 2 sons with what is now known as the demon of Luna Park. A guy dressed up in some scary motherfucking costume that's made out of cow skins and horns on top of his skull, picked one of the boys out at random and put his hand on his shoulder to pose for the photo. The image, which I'll share on Luna Park, the image, which I'll share on our socials, many have pointed out the costume's resemblance to the demon Malak, who is known for its lust for child sacrifice, which of course has spouted various conspiracies about whether this person had anything to actually do with the fire.
There's so many conspiracies, isn't there, when it comes to the Luna Park fires? Yeah.
He still remains unidentified to this day, whoever was in the costume. He does have some fucking body on him though. So he's got like the cow skins that come down the side, and then you see just the torso, and it's ripped. I digress. The mother. That's the gay coming out in me. The mother sees the photo, obviously, and she takes it as a strange omen of the tragedy that lay before them that day, and that there was nothing that she could have done to stop it from happening. The fire is
she still can't, darling. Like, hindsight is a wonderful thing. If once they're dead, they're gone, right?
Exactly.
You can blame yourself, but
and that would be what I think has made her take solace in the fact she went to get the ice creams. Maybe she should have made them wait longer. Maybe she should have demanded to wait. You'd have all these questions in your head.
Yeah.
By
Absolutely.
By her seeing this photo, it's probably given her peace that nothing that she would have done or could have done would have ever stopped the tragedy from happening. So the fire is ruled to have been caused by an electrical fault based on the fact that they couldn't actually find the cause of the fire. It is believed that the conclusion was reached far too quickly, and it is alleged that no tests had been done on the site. So witnesses have said that they did no actual tests on the site. The wreckage had not been collected and bagged methodically. There were witnesses who were never interviewed, including staff who were working on the night. And so another theory of what caused the fire comes to light. Some witnesses who survived the tragedy, who were actually on the ghost train, made statements that they could smell kerosene near the fake fireplace in the attraction. There were also multiple reports citing a group of men who were dressed as bikers standing near the ride at the time of the fire, and are heard saying, "I spread the kerosene out, lit it with a match," and another one saying to him, "You're a fool for doing it." And then they start running for the exit. The theory is that Abe Saffron, an infamous figure in the Sydney underworld, and you remember
I've heard
back
this
then,
one, I think.
and the Sydney underworld back in the 70s, even the 80s,
70s and 80s, yeah.
fucking huge. You got King's Cross, all the shit that happened there. So the theory is that he had his sights set on the Luna Park site due to the location and the potential that it had for development opportunities. So the rumors are that he orchestrated the fire to force the eviction of the current tenants. Apparently, as well, from other statements that have been made afterwards, there was never any intention for anyone to die. They did it late at night. They thought that there wouldn't be people on the ride, but obviously the ride is still going. So whoever lit the match fucking knew. Maybe the person who lit the match, one of the bikers, did it, went askew from the orders, when the orders were probably to do it after the park had closed, yada, 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 but did it anyway.
But what would have been the motive?
Well, because he wanted the land. So he wanted to show that there was an electrical fault or that the Luna Park was unsafe. The rumours are he orchestrated the fire to force the eviction of the current tenants. The company that ends up winning the tender from the New South Wales government after the fire for the area, because it shuts down the park, was one...
For years it was shut down, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. Was one funded by Saffron's relatives. And also, once they get the tender, 100 of Saffron's arcade gaming machines were used on the site. There's also claims that multiple police and political figures involved in the investigation, lease approval process, and the subsequent inquiries were involved with Saffron, showing that the corruption went all the way to the top.
Yeah.
And he was protected basically by this circle of people, and they all knew what was happening, which would bring light into why they didn't do too much investigation into the fire. They could have known where the fire started from back then. If they were investigating the cause of the fire, they would have seen the hotspot, I guess, around where the fire started with the kerosene, but they still put it down to an electrical fault. Based on this, there are calls for fresh investigations into the whole fucking...
That was recent too, wasn't it? That was like 6 months or so. There was requests for
So there was a special
new evidence and stuff.
Exactly. There was a special that was on ABC that was called Exposed, the Ghost Train Fire, and it's on ABC iView now, so you can watch that and get further information on the case itself. But the most tragic part of the story is that 18 months prior to the fire, the local North Sydney Council and local fire brigade requested that Luna Park management develop an adequate fire management program, including a sprinkler system in the ghost train, which they failed to do and never did. Management, of course, came under fire, but they were never charged with negligence.
That wouldn't You wouldn't get away with that now, would you? After everything that happened at
100%.
Dreamworld.
Look at exactly. That's obviously what happened at Dreamworld was some negligent act, but it wasn't a fucking mob started thing allegedly.
No.
So yeah, that's the story of the Luna Park Ghost Train fire.
So the Luna Park Ghost Train fire. Just looking at the date when you were talking about it, and I talked about this in that intro, that I remember this, but then I realised it's 1979 and I wasn't born yet. But it was something that I think we grew up with in the 80s. It was sort of like that horror story that our parents used to tell about rides. And, I think every time I went to a carnival or something like that in the 80s, it was like, oh, the Luna Park Ghost Train fire.
What, to spook you or to make you not want to go by yourself? Or
look, my mum was a bit of a weirdo when it comes to scary things. I've talked before about on the podcast about how she used to make me watch horror movies when I was very young, and she used to like to terrify me. So maybe it was because she just wanted to spook me or freak me out. I don't know, but I do remember her talking about it, and also that Luna Park was closed for a period of time.
Yeah,
and it was closed for a little while, wasn't it? How long was it closed for?
It was. So it closed pretty much immediately after the fire. Well, immediately after the fire, the tragedy. It was then demolished and reopened then in 1982 under the name Harbourside Amusement Park. And see, that's another thing about Saffron's involvement. His family was involved in the Harbourside franchise or fucking business organisation. Yeah, and then in 1990, that lease was terminated, and once again the park was closed. But then it reopened again a few years after that, and from my research, I believe it's closing again till about June this year, so they can put more rides and attractions in. And I bet you they have a fire safe plan. But it's
I'm sure that there was a period where it was closed for years and years and years, though. I'm sure there was.
That must have been after in the 1990 where the lease was terminated and the park was closed, because the only one that was around was the one in Melbourne.
Was the Melbourne one, which we've been to.
We've been to, but it's not as big as the Sydney one, and the rides it was very small. It was like a little fair, wasn't it?
Yeah, but have you been to the Sydney one?
No. So when I've gone to
the Sydney one isn't massive either. It's not like a Dreamworld or a Movie World or anything like that. Like, it's got a few rides and stuff, but it's certainly not. I went there thinking it was going to be massive and epic. I've been there a couple of times now, but
anyway, I've never been there, but you're right. They always do concerts there and stuff, but now they're looking at opening it again later this year with more rides.
But unless they were to purchase something nearby, and I can't fully think about the geography of what's around there, but it's on the water. So it can only go so far. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't really make it much bigger unless, and it's right, it's under a really big bridge too. I can't think of what bridge it is. So it's in a weird little spot where you can't make it much bigger. So if they're purchasing other rides, I don't know how, they must have maybe something next door closed and they've purchased another piece of land or something like that. But it's not a massive big area.
Or they've taken down a few rides and making it.
Yeah, they're updating.
So the bridge that you're talking about is the Sydney Harbour Bridge.
God, I knew it was a big important bridge. Just didn't know what bridge it was.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, but it's funny that you remember it and have the tales, because obviously you grew up on the Central Coast, and then up here I'd never heard of it until they did.
Oh, had you not?
No, never heard anything about it until I knew that there was that special on
TV. I definitely heard about it when I was a kid. Yeah, but again, you're probably right. It's because I grew up on the Central Coast.
Yeah, it's more local. Belinda Bosart actually told me about it, which got piqued my interest in the case.
Because it was really the only theme park around was Luna Park back in those days. So, when we were quite small. Yeah. So,
well, don't you take away the fucking glitz and glam of old Sydney town, please?
It is technically classed as a theme park.
Also mentioned in Stupid Bitches
Dre's Wonderland.
episode 3, Back in Time.
We're really pulling in the catalogue tonight, aren't we? The
Yeah.
catalogue of episodes. We've got so many going. But there was also Australia's Wonderland.
I've been to that.
But
Anyway.
I remember it being amazing back in the day, and I'm loving it.
Maybe we need to do theme parks as an episode.
Pop culture episode. That's a great idea. I love it.
So anyway, that's my my telling of the tale of the Luna Park Ghost Train fire. Why don't you enlighten us? Thank you. Why don't you enlighten us with some of your chopper religion?
Oh, look, I can't wait. I think I say that every week, don't I? Once I get to my topic, I'm like, I'm really excited about this, and I'm so excited about this. And I can't remember if we edited this out or not, but there was an episode when we were recording and we were talking about, hey, stupid bitch, the fact that we had, I think it was maybe the Gerald Baden Clay, and I talked about the fact that I wanted to do Chopper because I wanted to pick a great topic for the premiere episode of season 2, Stupid Bitches Say What. And in the end, I went with the Baden Clays, which I thought was a bit of a, didn't have as much going on. But the reason I was weighing up whether or not I'd do Chopper or not was because we'd recently watched the movie. Do you remember me telling you that?
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's in that podcast, and I said I'd never watched the movie. Yeah, my brother-in-law was like, what? You've never seen Chopper? Like, I've heard the jokes and I've heard some of the sayings, of course. Like, he's a bit of an icon, an Aussie icon. Like, everyone knows who he is. So Aaron insisted that we watch it. Link also hadn't seen it. He was, super pumped to watch it. So we all sat down and watched it. And it's quite a, how would you say, violent and a little on the side of traumatic movie. There's some horrible parts in it, but it's also quite amusing. And Chopper as a person is quite nuts, but unapologetically so. Like, he knows he's messed up.
But that's what brings a lot of conflict into the story that is Chopper, in the sense that he's a murderer, but he's a bit of an Australian icon. And it sort of makes a bit of a, and like the movie was a smash box office success. It really launched Eric Bana's fame internationally. And I actually got to see the premiere of it through work at the time. I was working in a ministerial office, and there was, and I got to meet the guy who did the screenplay for it. And
I had his name somewhere. Yep.
And the director was there too, and it really launched the director's fucking career too. But yeah, it is conflicting in the sense that you're like, oh my God, Chopper's so cool, but
look, talking about that, because I'm going to try, I've got a whole bunch of quotes, and look, I guess in the research that I've done, when you look at Chopper as a movie, it was supposed to be based on the book that he had written, loosely based on the book. So is it really accurate? Is Mark Reed's account in that book really accurate? Who can say, really? But there's a whole bunch of quotes, and they do come from the film. So I guess it's hard to say if they're really Eric Bana's or the directors, or Chopper said them himself. But I'm going to use them as if Chopper said them, because they're fucking hilarious. But talking about what you're saying about him becoming a bit of an icon, let me just give you this one quote. I'm just a normal bloke who likes a bit of torture.
So that takes the normal out of the normal bloke, dude.
Look, that's not even the good ones. There's so many more amazing ones, which I'm going to drop throughout my storytelling of Chopper. But let me just go right back to the beginning. But if you haven't seen the film, and I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler here, it's all available on Wiki anyway. But if you're Aussie, and even for our listeners who aren't Australian, if you want a good watch and a bit of a holy shit, ha 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 moments, you got to watch it. It's so, and Eric Bana is just a legend. Ever since The Castle, ever since, what was the character he did in Fast Forward and Comedy Company? What was he? What did he used to do? I can't even think. He did so many.
What was his name? Porter.
It was
It was Peter.
And there was
Hi, Porter. Poito and Shadow.
Poito, and he had his smokes and his little Bonds t-shirt that he used to have, and he had his Winnie's blues up his shoulder, didn't he?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And he used to flip his hands up. And they were always waiting for Centrelink, and he always had his stubbies on. But he did a few other characters, I think, as well. But yeah, Eric Bana is just a god. I adore him. He can't really do anything wrong in my eyes. I think he's amazing. So, you know, is my presentation of Mark Brendan Reid more Chopper or more Eric Bana? It's hard to say. You decide. You decide.
Watch the movie and let us know.
Yes. Anyway. All right. So Chopper Reid, aka Mark Brendan Reid, was born in November 1954. He was an Australian convicted criminal, gang member, and author. And you're going to love this bit. I'm going to go into it in a bit more detail down the track. Reid, Chopper, wrote a series of semi-autobiographical fictional crime novels as well as children's books.
Oh.
The 2000, we're going to get to that and you're going to piss yourself laughing when we do. The 2000 film Chopper is based on his life. So just a little bit about his biography, because I think it does tell a little bit of a story about how he may have gotten to where he was in life. So he was born to a former Army and World War II veteran, Keith Reid. Keith Reid is portrayed in the film. Whether, again, accurately or not, it's hard to say, because when you hear about his childhood, it's like, oh, they're shown as getting along, or, you know, he goes and sees him when he gets out of prison in the movie, but it's hard to say if that actually really happened. Okay. Yeah. So his mother was a devout Seventh-day Adventist, but he was placed in a children's home for the first 5 years of his life. So, you know, in the mid-50s, that was pretty tough. You can imagine what kind of, you know,
institution that was.
Horror he may have encountered as a small child living that way. He grew up in Melbourne, the suburbs of Collingwood.
He lived in a mental institution.
No, he was in a children's home for the first 5 years of his life.
Oh, wow.
And it doesn't really say why. But look, the other part I think you need to know about Chopper is that I think he could stretch the truth a little bit. And look, I'll tell you what, going back to some of his quotes, and this is one of my dad's favourite quotes, I have to say. Let me just get it. Never let the truth get in the way of a good yarn is one of the ones that he used to say. So you don't know how much is true and how much isn't. But still, it's a very colourful story. But yes. So look, he was placed in a children's home for the first 5 years of his life. He grew up in the Melbourne suburbs of Collingwood and Fitzroy. He was bullied at school, saying that by the age of 15, he had been on the losing end of several hundred fights, and that his father, usually on his mother's recommendation, beat him often as a child. So it's a bit of a contradiction. He was in a children's home for 5 years, but then he talks about living with his, you know, mother and father and
probably from the age of 5 onwards,
yeah. So it also says that he had been molested as a child, and he was made a ward of the state by the age of 14 and placed in several mental institutions as a teenager. So he went back into a home. So he spent the first 5 years of his life in a home, talks about his mum and dad being around, and they used to beat him quite a bit, but then was eventually ended up back in a home at the 14th, but it does say that he was molested. And then was also placed...
So he was with his parents from 5 till 14?
According to Wikipedia, yes. But again, if this is his recollection or if it's based on information that's public record, I'm not entirely sure, but this is what it's telling me.
And based on his quote about never letting truth get in the way of a good story, you know, you never actually take for fucking...
Yes. But we know that generally Wikipedia uses multiple sources to verify their information, so they don't just go based on word of mouth as well. So there could potentially be some, you know, state records and things like that corroborate it. So, but yeah, so he was placed in several mental institutions as a teenager, where he states he underwent electroshock therapy. So I guess that's another part, that because he says that happened. Could it not? Look, he's pretty crazy. So wouldn't be surprised if it happened, but again, whether that's true or not, can't confirm. So whilst he was still young, he was already an accomplished street fighter and the leader of the Surrey Road Gang, a hardened street gang with a notorious reputation for violence. He began his criminal career by robbing drug dealers based in massage parlours in the Paran area. He later graduated to kidnapping and torturing members of the criminal underworld, often using a blowtorch or bolt cutters to remove the toes of his victims as an incentive for them to produce enough money so that Reed would leave them alone. So,
torch their toes off.
Yeah, and he would leave them alive a lot of the time so that they would give him money. And it goes back and forth about he served time for, lots of crimes, and I'll talk about that in a moment. He claims he killed a lot of people, but he also claims he doesn't know how many people he killed. He goes back and forth a little bit. I believe his drug use is questionable. He claims that he hates drug users, but he's also famously quoted as saying, for someone to hate something, it comes from somewhere. So, he obviously is basically admitted to the fact that he did drugs at one point in his life.
Or is surrounded by drugs and shit, yeah.
Yes, really hates drugs. Or he says to as he gets older, but almost admits to being a drug user at one point in his life. So he tortured these people. But he, again, is famously quoted as saying, well, they were the scum of the earth. What's a bit of torture when they're just people who shouldn't be alive anyway?
Thank God him and John Bunting didn't get together.
Well, I know I'm thinking about, the similarities here. But in Reed's eyes, he preyed on people who were already preying on other people. And he's certainly a lot of the people that he was involved with were of a criminal nature. I think Bunting's a little bit different, where it's proven
he
that
just
he preyed on
assumed
people.
Yeah,
he had it in his head, but we know that those victims had done nothing, to deserve anything that he believed that they had done. Anyway, so, and I thought this was quite amusing. Reed spent only 13 months outside of prison between the ages of 20 and 38, having been convicted of crimes including armed robbery, firearm offences, assault, arson, impersonating a police officer, and kidnapping. So he spent all that time in prison. And look, there's definitely a list of crimes and things that he's done, but he didn't murder anyone yet, or at least they couldn't pin him on it.
Yeah.
They didn't charge him. And then, of course, again, classically, Reed had a fellow inmate cut both of his ears off in order to be able to leave H Division temporarily.
Did he cut both his ears off?
Yeah, he had an inmate do it. So you watch it in the film and it's pretty awful to see what happens. And he's like going to the guy, hack into it, mate. Get in there. What are you doing? The guy who's trying to cut his ears off is, quite queasy and really struggling with it. And obviously it's not something you could probably do yourself.
And why did he do that, to go to the nurse's ward?
Yes, so he wanted to get out. Look, and I can't actually fully remember the situation from the movie, but he wanted to get out of the block for some reason, and they said, you'll never get out of this block. I think there was a hit on him.
You'll never get out of this block with both your ears, mate.
Yeah, well, and all the people who ran the prison loved him. They come in. They used to have TV time with him in his room. The wardens would come in, open the gates of his cell and stuff, and sit down and have a cup of tea and stuff. They loved him. He was very charismatic.
I'm sure he ends up banging one of the nurses
in the movie.
Well, I'm sure it was in the movie too.
Well, he's married. He ends up getting married twice. The woman he married lastly was his last wife, and the first one, I didn't actually write down the notes, but she was something to do. I don't think she was part of the prison, but it was something that was related. I don't know how they met. It doesn't go into that, but you could be right. But the movie, have you seen the film?
Yeah, I saw the premiere.
Oh,
But I haven't like
Positive.
watched it over and over since or anything like that. I think I've seen a special. Maybe it was a TV
Yeah.
special with him that I saw about the nurse.
So it starts, the film starts with him being interviewed about his book that he's just written by this female reporter. And she's quite attractive and he's making all these jokes and she's clearly charmed by him. So that could have led into something about, him having sex with anyone. Like, he was quite charming. I think he didn't have a lot of problems pulling the women. Yeah. But incredibly violent towards women as well. So again, I'm going to get to that. So he had his ears cut off. In his biography, Reed claimed that this was to avoid an ambush by other inmates by being transferred to the mental health wing. He later states that he did so to win a bet. It's hard to say. The nickname Chopper was given to him long before this from a childhood cartoon character. So his ears being chopped off was not how he got the name Chopper. Chopper mate.
It's related to a cartoon character.
Yeah. So this part is portrayed in the film. He ended up being stabbed by a member of his own gang in prison. So he had a whole big gang. He ruled out outside of the prison. He ruled inside the prison in a sneak attack when they felt that his plan to cripple every other inmate in the entire division and win the gang war in one fell swoop was going too far. So basically he says to them all, he murders one of the inmates that he had a bit of a barney with. It's Keithy they call him. I'm going to jump to the quote about Keithy because it's one of my favourite.
I think you mentioned that in the previous episode too. I don't know if it made the cut or not.
In the film. No, I don't think it did. Where have I put it? Keithy seems to have done himself a mischief.
That's right.
So Keithy's minding his own business, just hanging out in the prison. Chopper just comes on him, just for no apparent reason at all. They didn't really like each other, but that was it. Stabs him to death, stabs him in the neck, he's bleeding out. This guy's sort of saying, what'd you do that for? Come on, Chopper, you're a nasty person. And Chopper gets a little bit upset at that. This dude's bleeding out in front of him. And Chopper's like, what do you mean I'm not a good person? I'm a good person. Everyone knows I'm a good person. Keithy's bleeding out. And then he says to the wardsmans, Keithy seems to have done himself a mischief. While the man's bleeding out and goes on to die in the prison. Yeah. So then he's done himself a mischief. And it's all like shocked. And then I think I'm going to jump to another quote now because then he gets interrogated. So obviously,
I do remember, just before you get to that, I do remember when the person from his own gang stabbed him. And when he stabbed him in the guts, he's looking down at it and he's going, oh, come on, mate. What you doing? What you do that for? Come on, give us a hug. Something, doesn't it?
And then he keeps stabbing him. He goes, mate, if you keep stabbing me, you're going to kill me.
Yeah, like he was dumbfounded.
And his mate just keeps stabbing him because there was a hit on him. And I think they felt backed into a corner a little bit because Chopper was like, he killed this other bloke for no apparent reason. He was a bit of a lunatic, well known for being a lunatic, and had said, if they've got a hit on me, I'm going to cripple them all. So he had a surefire plan that he was going to cripple everyone who was on this rival gang in prison and break their kneecaps and do horrible things to them. And his mates who had known him for a long time are like, dude, whoa, hold up. We don't want to do that. We just want to get out. We want to serve our time and get out.
Yeah.
So they ended up, stabbing him, and that's what I was talking about before. And there's another quote that I'll go into after I read through these bits. But let me just jump ahead. You might have to cancel this. Okay, so I think I've already said this, but I'm going to just quickly go through because I can't remember exactly where I got to. But Reed was stabbed by members of his own gang in prison in a sneak attack when they felt that his plan to cripple every other inmate in the entire division and win the gang war in one fell swoop was going too far. Another theory is that Jimmy Lonahan, a longtime friend of Reed with Patrick Blue Barnes, wished to benefit from the contract put on Reed's head by the Painters and Dockers Union, which Keithy was a part of.
Yeah.
Reed, after the stabbing of his mate, Jimmy, James Lonergan. He lost several feet of intestine in the attack. But that's where the quote is, Jimmy, mate, if you keep stabbing me, I'm going to die. He keeps stabbing him. But then he goes
and he lost several feet of intestines from that.
Yeah. He stabbed him. He stabbed him a lot. But look, this is the quote that he says after this event, and he recovers, obviously, eventually gets out of prison and goes back and gets out and yada yada. So what he says about the incident where his best mate has stabbed him, look, the bloke's been my best mate since 1975. We've had our fallouts from time to time. It's no big deal. You know, it's like if your mum stabs you, what do? You don't get upset. You don't get angry. You go, shit, my mum stabbed me. I better get off to the hospital.
So the moral of the story is you want to be on Chopper's good side. You want to be best friends.
But if your mate stabs you, you don't get upset with him. You go, shit. He stabbed me. I better get to the hospital. It's kind of giving him, you know, a bit of a break and saying, well, he must have had his reasons. Like, if your mum stabbed you, she had a reason. She stabbed you because she did something wrong. You deserved it. Get to the hospital and get it fixed.
I trust him enough to know that there was a reason behind this.
Yeah, he had his reasons. It's totally justified. So where was I? Okay. So Reed was granted parole early in 1998 and regained his freedom. And in 2002, he was questioned over the disappearance of Sydney Collins. So he had already been questioned over the disappearance of this fella. And there's a whole bunch of different disappearances that he was involved in. And I didn't want to go into them all because they all end up pretty much the same way, unresolved. So he was again questioned over the disappearance of Sydney Collins, who he had been questioned about before. Who is this gentleman, Sydney Collins, is still on the Australian missing persons list after going missing in suspicious circumstances. Reed admitted to having murdered Collins in his last broadcast interview before he died. So he died of lung cancer, I believe, but I'll touch on that in a moment. On a 60 Minutes program in October 2013, Reed expressed no remorse for killing Collins, alleging he was stupid for allowing Reed to shoot on 2 occasions with his own gun. So it was basically, even though he'd been questioned a couple of times and they couldn't prove he killed this bloke, he basically admitted to it, but he was like, well, it's his fault. He let me get my gun out and he let me get 2 shots off, so too bad. In the same interview, he also discussed the 1971 shooting of union boss Desmond Costello, the 1974 suicide of pedophile Reginald Isaacs. Again, this is where it draws a little bit of similarities to the bodies
John
in the
Barton,
barrel. Was he a pedophile or was it someone, you know, Chopper had it in for or whatever? And the 1987 shooting of Siam Ozakam, Sammy the Turk. That's also in the film. Overall, Reed variously claimed to have been involved in the killing of 19 people and the attempted murder of 11 others. In 1988, he turned up drunk to a live television show hosted by Elle McFeece, and to the outrage. Yeah. Remember when she had her show back in the day? Yeah. And to the outrage of many viewers, gave a colourful account of feeding a man into a cement mixer. Yeah. In an April 2013 interview with the New York Times, Reed said, look, honestly, I haven't killed that many people. Probably about 4 or 7, depending on how you look at it.
So either this amount or double that amount. I'm not sure.
That's it. So Reed was an author of crime novels, selling more than 500 copies of his works. 500,000 copies of his works. His first book, Chopper from the Inside, was collected from letters he sent while incarcerated in Melbourne's Pentridge prison and published in 1991. It contains tales and anecdotes of his criminal and prison exploits. And then it goes on to talk about the other books that he wrote, which are in a similar vein. But then yes, and then he went on to write a children's book, and attempts were made to ban the children's book, and it was called Hooky the Cripple. So I'm going to read you.
Oh my God.
I know.
What are you reading, Giles? Hooky the cripple, Dad.
So you might have to just cut this delay while I look it up, Hooky the Cripple, because I didn't actually put these notes, and I thought that they were contained in the original bit, but I'm going to give you Hooky. This is the summary on Goodreads. Hooky the Cripple is a dark and violent tale for our times. Okay. Let's read.
Does it have any age recommendations that go with the book?
Well, I'll read you what it says on Wiki, okay? So Hooky the Cripple is a 2002 novel written by Mark Brendan Chopper Reed, illustrated by Adam Cullen, and published by Pluto Press. It was formatted as a book for young readers, but by some authorities was considered as containing too much violence for being suitable for children. The book received rather mixed response. While the Queensland government body, Access Ed, recommended it for secondary schools, a school in Victoria banned it. And likewise, the president of the Australian Families Association in Queensland wanted it banned from schools. Reed responded saying, "Ban it. Just go out and ban it. I'm going to make a fortune if they ban it," believing the publicity from a ban would increase the book's sales.
Well, that's true. Because you think about when a movie, do you remember back in the day when a movie was banned from Australia? All everyone wanted to do was fucking go watch the movie.
Look, I remember when I'm going to read the synopsis on Goodreads, shall I? What the book's about.
Yeah.
I remember when Eminem's album was banned from coming into Australia. Do you remember that? Years and years ago, one of his it might have been his first album or second album, and it was banned from coming into Australia. It eventually got in, obviously, but they
Well, that was in the day of LimeWire and shit.
Hooky the Cripple, the grim tale of a hunchback. A violent fairy tale set in the 16th century Italy. Hooky the Cripple was constantly beaten as a child by Manuelo the butcher, but when he fights back against his tormentor, he must face the consequences. God, I have to buy it and read it just to read it, don't I? Like, and then present it back on the podcast. But look, he just is full of surprises, this man, isn't he? The grim tale of a hunchback who triumphs. And this is another summary of it.
I think Disney already did a movie about that too.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll go back because I thought you'd think that was incredibly amusing.
It is.
So look, I've got a few more quotes that I want to go through, and I'll touch on what part they were in Chopper's life, but I'll talk about his death. So he contracted hepatitis C during his time in prison, possibly as a result of using shared razor blades. In March 2008, he revealed he had only 2 to 5 years to live and required a liver transplant. However, he refused to agree to the procedure, stating that while the transplant would save him, he did not want one when an organ could be provided to someone else. In April 2012, he was diagnosed with liver cancer. He underwent surgery in July 2012 to remove tumours from his liver, and in late September 2013, he was admitted to Melbourne Private Hospital in failing health. He died of the illness on the 9th of October 2013, aged 58.
Wow. He does look like someone that would have beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, though, doesn't he?
Without a doubt. So,
you know, look, someone that drinks beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner too, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he's an incredibly scary man, incredibly rough man, but super amusing, and as I said, full of surprises. Nothing really kept him down, mate. He just kept getting back up.
Stabbing him in the guts.
Exactly. Look, I'm going to refer to a couple of final quotes before we finish up on Mark Brendan Reed, aka Chopper. One that everyone should know is the quote, Neville fucking Bartos. That's the guy that is shot in the leg, played by Vince Colosimo in the film.
Oh, yeah.
Let's go back to the quote about what happened. Chopper says, look, this is after he gets out of prison and he's previously shot Neville Bartos in the leg. Look, you're not still angry at me about the leg, are you? Neville, nah, forget about it. Chopper, because I don't know if you remember, Neville, but I had that bloody shotgun pointed at your head. I reconsidered and dropped it down to your kneecap, remember? Neville,
yes,
forget about it. Neville's, forget about it, all right? Chopper, I mean, what the bloody hell were you doing getting lippy at me with a bloody shotgun? I had a bloody loaded shotgun. Neville, the leg is okay, all right.
Yeah,
it's not his fault. It's not his fault. Don't get lippy with me when I'm holding a shotgun.
Yeah. That's a psychopath.
So this is what he says after Keithy's laying on the ground. Oh, sorry, after Keithy had passed away and they found out that Keithy didn't survive the stabbing. He gets interrogated by, the police, the prison police, and this is what he says. Look, all I can tell you is what I've already told Mr. Beasley. None of us saw anything. It was just one of those things. Bluey Barnes was reading a magazine. Ambrose Hatchison was taking a piss. Johnny Price was washing his hands. Jimmy Lonahan was watching a bull ant cross across the table. And I was watching Jimmy watching the bull ant. So that's his justification. Keithy seems to have done himself a mischief, is what it is. So this is another one about Neville fucking Bartos getting shot again. He'd already shot him in the leg, but he goes to his house one time and wants a bit of money. He's pissed off that Neville became wealthy even after he shot him in the legs. He doesn't like Neville at all. Anyway, Neville's throwing around his money in the clubs and stuff, and he decides he's going to take some money from him again. So he rocks up to his house and he ends up shooting him again for the second time, Neville fucking Bartos. So he gets interviewed. I think he shoots him in the stomach. Yeah, he shoots him in the stomach, and again he survives. But he gets interviewed about shooting Neville Bartos again for the second time, and this is what he says. So the detective says, "So you took him to the hospital?" And Chopper says, "No, I didn't take him to the bloody hospital. Now tell me this, right? Why would I shoot a bloke, bang, and then put him in the bloody car and whiz him off to the hospital at 100 miles an hour? It defeats the purpose of having shot him in the first place. What's more, it's bloody insulting. It's bloody insulting. I mean, am I the only bloody stand-up man in the country who provides a medical plan for some of these characters? No, I did not drive him to the hospital. Do I look like motherfucking Teresa?"
No, you do not.
Cracks me up. And then, okay, I'm going to finish on one of the other ones. He says when they're talking about his book and he's getting interviewed, he says, in reference to himself, even Beethoven had critics. He's, he's likening himself to the level of Beethoven. And then just lastly, he says again when he talks about writing the book, "Yeah, I know. I can't even bloody spell. What about those poor bloody academics, those college graduates battling their guts out to write some airy-fairy piece of exaggerated artwork? And here's a bloke sitting in a cell who can't spell, and he's written a bestseller. It sold 250,000 copies and it's still selling. And he's writing another one and I can't even spell. I'm semi-bloody illiterate."
You do you, Chopper. You do you.
But the quotes are by far the funniest part of that whole story. It's just, But he's dead now,
He is. And he went in a way that probably a lot of people would be happy for him to go, dying of cancer.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and I don't want to glorify him, but it was nice that he was like, look, give the liver to someone who's probably going to treat it better than he would.
Yeah. And probably by that time, his lifestyle wouldn't have been great. He lived a life of intense hardship. And then a life of crime and a life in prison, incarcerated.
And you can never relax in a life of crime like that, can you? You can't just chill out. You're always thinking about your next move or who's trying to make their next move on you.
I think he would have been, he would have had a lot of weapons always around. He wouldn't have never felt safe without a gun or, packing something.
Sleeping with one eye open and shit.
Yeah.
So while he was a funny fucker and made some money, I guess, could he have made money off his selling about his crimes? He obviously did. Because
he wasn't incarcerated then. So, look, I think it was based on letters that he wrote. So he didn't really talk about the crimes. I think that there was more information that was added to some of those things, but I think it was left in, again, I haven't read the book, so I can't really quite, and I do believe that they took a lot of liberties in the movie and filled in a lot of blanks. Again, whether truthfully or not, don't know. The only one who knows that is Chopper, and he'd gone to his grave.
And Chopper, and once you like that too, no matter how many times you lie, that lie becomes the truth. So in his head, it's the truth.
Oh, he was the kind of person that 100% believed the shit that he spun. Once he said it, it became fact, whether or not, and you couldn't have ever convinced him otherwise, even though he had lived a completely different reality.
Yeah.
He was, narcissistic is, the perfect description of that sort of behavior. Like, it's all about what he can get from it. Yeah, exactly. But certainly an amusing story.
Nonetheless.
Yes.
No, that was good. That was good. It's actually making me want to watch the movie again, and I'm not really into those kinds of movies.
No, I wasn't either. It's certainly not my thing. But I'm glad I watched it because I did quite enjoy it. And I didn't go into as much detail. Like, there's some really full-on parts in it where you're just like, fucking hell. That bit where he stabs that guy in prison, I think he's done himself a mischief. And then he goes on to blatant, and they all know that he's done it, but that was before the times when they had cameras and stuff everywhere in the prison cells. Yeah. So it was, if no one was going to throw his name in and say he did it, there was no proof.
Snitches get stitches, baby.
Exactly. And he had a lot of weight behind him, like he was well known for being ruthless.
So-and-so, what's the bullet?
Yeah. Watching the bullet crawl across the table. I was watching him. Watch the bullet.
Vinny will be delighted that I'll watch that movie because I think it's one of Vinny's favourites. And
I was actually going to say, has he seen it? Because I was thinking he would love it.
I saw it in Ireland, and I'm pretty sure him and his bros have watched it and fucking love it. Like, they love Mick Dundee, so they'd love Chopper.
Yeah. Well, like when Aaron was watching it, Aaron's one of Aaron's favourite movies too. He was just wetting himself all the way through. Like, it's such a great movie, and it is such a funny, like, it's you would say it's like half funny. Like, some parts are, but it's just the scenarios and the situations that
the
he ends up in.
Unbelievableness of it all too, just like, what
the
fuck, dude? Yeah.
And he ends up working for the police at one point, and then people call him out on it, and he lies about it, and they don't know what to believe. And, he is working for the police, but he manages to convince them that he's not when they blatantly see him working for the police. And, he was really able to manipulate everything in a way that people were just like, what? But I guess he was dealing with, drug dealers and drug takers. And
you still have to be convincing, I think, to get away with that shit. And it's funny because there's a lot of people like that. And John Bunting, in a way, even though his fucking mindset was fucked up, if these people actually were decent humans and ended up in a position of power, they could do a lot of great things through their intellect or their skills or their influence. But they don't do great things. They do terrible things.
But look, whilst I saw some similarities in John Bunting and, the recollection of events when it comes to Chopper Read, I honestly, in my opinion, don't believe that they're in the same category. I think that definitely Chopper was, he did some horrible things, and again, but some of them could have been fabricated because you never really know. But John Bunting was a piece of work. He was an evil piece of work. I don't believe Chopper was on that level. He was a bad man, but not like that.
No, I agree.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Stupid Bitches Say What. We hope you enjoyed the chilling tales we had for you in this episode. Join us next week as we warm up our vocal pipes for our pop culture episode on musicals. Woo!
Oh, indeed. Now, did you know that season 1 of our podcast is now available on YouTube? Search for Stupid Bees Say What and relive your joy of the first season by watching the shenanigans we get up to while recording. Some things you just can't catch in audio. Bye, stupid bitches.
Good night, stupid bitches.
Yeah, that stupid bitch. He's a stupid bitch. What a stupid bitch. That's stupid.